where not less than 7,000 civilians have died from over 800 terrorist attacks in Burkina Faso and Mali. This is according to the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, Early Warning and Response Network report. Responding to the alarming figures, Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yusuf Tuggar, and ECOWAS Head of Council is now calling for an urgent need to safeguard the security of residents of the region. Arise correspondent Punarimam Benjamin reports.
This is the 52nd Mediation and Security Council meeting of ECOWAS ministers in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Top on the agenda is the issue of insecurity in the ECOWAS region and the Sahel. At the event, Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, who is also the chairman of Council, emphasizes the urgent need for stronger action against the region's rising instability. Tuggar believes that ECOWAS has to redouble its efforts and stand united against the forces of terror and despair.
And as we join forces to find common solutions to the continuing challenge of violent extremism and foreign interference, we should also remain mindful of the broader challenge of cooperation to help tackle the underlying causes of instability in our region: climate change, migration, organized criminal activity, global terms of trade, and access to financing. Our task today is to consider how best to meet the immediate symptoms of the condition we face, and also how to establish firmer foundations to reduce inequality and poverty and strengthen democracy.
ECOWAS President Aliou Touré says that the ongoing lack of communication between Sahelian nations and ECOWAS is troubling and weakening the regional integration agenda's unity of purpose.
Governance deficits and marginalization have strained social contracts, engendering bitter rivalries, unhealthy competition, organized crime, and violence. To complicate the situation, our region has also become the arena of geostrategic and geopolitical rivalries, and the explosion of misinformation and disinformation that engenders mistrust among and within communities and undermine social cohesion. As if that is not enough, our region is faced with disintegration.
However, the UN has continued to pledge its support. Its representative is promising to work closely with the organization to maintain peace, security, and development in West Africa.
I stress the need for them to contribute to the socio-economic development of partner countries in the region. I also highlighted the importance of supporting and building on efforts of ECOWAS. Meanwhile, UNOWAS and a delegation of sub-regional directors of UN agencies, funds, and programs in West Africa recently carried out missions to Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger to assess how the United Nations can continue to better support the peoples of these countries.
This meeting is coming at a very crucial time where there are unresolved issues in the ECOWAS region. But whether this meeting will provide a lasting solution to these challenges is what everyone will be expecting to see. Punarimam Benjamin, Arise News.
Of course, security continues to be on the front burner, not just in Nigeria, but in the entire region. Rufai, what is your take on this?
Okay, so a couple of things. Where are we with insecurity? Massive insecurity across the West African belt. What move have we made? Most of the move we have made has been as a result of the Western superpowers having incursions into our region. Number one, if you remember France in 2012, when they had problems in Mali, across the flanks of Mali, François Hollande then was the president of France. He sent in a couple of Raphael fighters, they cleared out most of these terrorists, they cleared them out to the flanks, and afterwards he set up something called Operation Barkhane that wound up recently. How well has that done in fighting terrorism? Some people argue not too well because you still have terrorists pouring across the border, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, Chad, and all of that. As regards Chad, Idris Deby, while he was alive, and his son, Deby now, has helped to push most of these people back to the Nigerian belt. Guinea too is, there's been a lot of work done as regards, fighting terrorism in Guinea and across the West African belt in general. So ECOWAS meeting and saying we need to be able to find a coordinated force to be able to fight. Yes, that's palpable. But the most important thing about this fighting force will be money, resource. What does ECOWAS have as resource? Not too many. Times in which ECOWAS have made a big incursion as regards fighting insecurity in the West African belt has constantly been about Nigeria's spending. We all remember the days in 96, 97 when we had ECOMOG that was mostly funded by Nigeria, the blowback that also had against the Abacha government. But it still did some work, restored peace in areas that was warring, factions that were warring, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and the likes. But as we speak today, we don't have that resource in Nigeria. Nigeria is currently fighting those security challenges on the local front. So how can we now harmonize the resource then? Some people have argued that some other parts must come into the fray. Some people have argued that probably there will be a dependence on the Western power. You saw how Nigeria quickly rebuffed the fact that America wanted to come set up a base, around here, owing to the fact that they've been pulled out of Niger, their initial base and all of that. So there's a lot of quandary. We must be able to look for how we can fund the fight against terrorism in this West African belt. And other partner countries must be able to come into play here. The days of letting Nigeria do the work alone is long gone because Nigeria does not even have that capacity for the funding as we speak. So we need to come up with more innovative solutions. We need to be able to use technology also to broker. We need to be able to use technology for surveillance and things like that. And we also need to be able to partner across lines, country lines, and share intelligence. The other day, Akwabi was saying that what happened in Goza was a complete intelligence failure. I think I mentioned that idea on Monday here. It speaks volumes for an attack like that to happen. Definitely somebody dropped the ball as regards intelligence. But the big question is, are we sharing intelligence enough through all of these ECOWAS structures across the country? I think those are the big challenges we have as regards insecurity here.
Okay, the subject is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nigeria, Yusuf Tuggar, speaking at the 52nd session of the Ministerial Committee of the ECOWAS on Mediation and Security Council of ECOWAS at the ministerial level. Now, when last the Joint Committee of Heads of State and Governments of ECOWAS met, the major issue was that they asked for a review of the level of security cooperation within the ECOWAS bloc. Now, this meeting is a follow-up to that review. And what they will be doing, what the ministers will be doing, at that summit, is to look at possibilities. And Yusuf Tuggar, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nigeria, who is chairman of the council, in his opening speech, called for joint action against terror. He also, in the same measure, talked about the fact that democracy and good governance is doing well in West Africa. On that note, I disagree with him. And educated people can immediately say, that they have examples to cite from Niger, from Chad, from Mali, from Burkina Faso, about how in West Africa we are having a reduction in terms of democratic consolidation. But on the other issue of joint action against terror, well, I think the minister and chairman of that ministerial council is on point to say that collaboration is needed. However, the question here that he has raised is that terrorism is a global issue. It's a global issue, but at the regional level, you have to deal with it. The question to ask is this: how effective has been the structures in West Africa to address the challenge of terrorism, banditry, and insurgency? Under the ECOWAS constitutive protocols, we have objection to terrorism, banditry, and insurgency. And it is on the basis of that ECOWAS set up what they call the multinational joint task force The Multinational Joint Task Force talks to this issue about joint action. It has Cameroon, it has Chad, it has Nigeria, it has Ghana, countries that came together. Also in that context, the ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West Africa, has what they call the task force on the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, because that is part of the challenge of terrorism. The question we ask is, again, how effective have those bodies been? The problem with those bodies is that they've not been really very effective. They hold meetings, they raise all the points. As the ministers at this summit, chaired by Yusuf Tuggar, are going to raise the same issues. But what effect do we see on the table? So I think at the end of the day, it's not just about regional cooperation. It's also about cooperation within the global context. All the textbooks on the subject tell you that it's an international problem. You have Boko Haram in Nigeria as linked up with the Islamic State, the Sahel region, you have the footprints of the international community, you have Russia playing a particular role. So what is important is the capacity of each of these countries who are trying to stabilize West Africa to be able to provide the lead. Now, Nigeria often takes the lead in these matters because many of these talk shops that they hold will require money. And Nigeria is the country that has the funds and that bears the brunt. And that is why, it's important that our Minister of Foreign Affairs is calling for, bilateral, multilateral cooperation at the region of the level, at the level of the region. After all, we always say that Africans are the ones to solve their own problems. So if you don't have the commitment from the African side, then of course, the international community will say, even the Africans are not serious about problems in their region. I hope that in terms of outcomes from this ministerial meeting, the ECOWAS heads of state and government who mandated them to begin the conversation would follow up appropriately. But this is not a new conversation. It's an old conversation. So in that regard, the Foreign Affairs Minister and Chairman of the Ministerial Council on Mediation and Terrorism in West Africa is not actually saying something new. It's not new. What we should be asking is the effectiveness of the proposals. Next year, ECOWAS will be 50 years. There are other issues relating to ECOWAS at 50, but I think the subject does not go that far. Maybe we'll have another opportunity when I will talk about ECOWAS at 50 and the issues at the administrative and at the protocol level.
Absolutely. So many issues bedeviling ECOWAS at the moment, and this is a very strategic moment in history when you look at the developments happening within the Sahel region. Of course, we know the exit of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger from ECOWAS has been a huge development. Now, it's been somewhat propelled and gained intensity in its contention with ECOWAS, in the fact that, of course, the alliance of the Sahel states was then created. Initially with just the three nations, Chad and Togo now later joined. Why is this a significant development? It's a significant development because just last month, I believe, in the last couple of weeks, the alliance of the Sahel states have started doing their own military drills. They are largely said to be backed by Russia. Now, there's a high risk of creating a sort of arms race here in West Africa and in the Sahel region when you see ECOWAS and a largely isolated alliance of the Sahel states now create a third body, which is in the form of terrorists, and you have a war on multiple fronts that could be fought. So the call from ECOWAS is timely and it's commendable, but we need to see the follow-up action to it. Because like I said, you see the alliance of the Sahel states are already holding joint military drills in Niger. What about ECOWAS? We hear the proposal for a joint standby military force. However, I believe that's being stalled by the fact that so much money needs to be brought to the table in order to make it a reality. But when you look at the nimble way with which the Alliance of the Sahel states have been handling their affairs, then one begs the question, what reform needs to happen within ECOWAS to see ECOWAS become more than what many people have started calling a toothless bulldog? A great conversation to be had, and I hope it will be taken forward and followed up with action.